First of all, I'm going to ask you to use one word or one phrase to describe President Trump's second term in office 1 year in. Margaret, let me start with you.
Well, the one word I would describe is obsessive. Trump, once he decides he wants something, he does not deviate. It doesn't matter if it's something that makes sense or not. For example, his tariffs against China, which he insisted upon, only to have to back down. Now he's obsessed about annexing Greenland, or now he's obsessed about ending immigration little by little, actually ending immigration from the global South. So I would say he's a man obsessed with his ideology, with his worldview, which I think is a very dangerous one. He's also obsessed with countering China, which led him to interfere in Venezuela and cut off a supply of oil to China. So I think these obsessions that he has drive much of what he does.
Professor Quelch, what would you use to describe President Trump's second term 1 year in?
I'd say it's been highly contentious, occasionally chaotic, but actually represents a work in progress to fulfill the promises of his agenda. Whether or not you like them is another matter.
His agenda being Make America Great Again.
Yes.
All right.
Specifically economically, with respect to not only internal economy development, but also attraction of foreign investment, ensuring that allies are paying their fair share in terms of NATO defense, for example, but also internally his promises with respect to tightening up immigration. Obviously, that has caused considerable angst in the country, but as I said, these are promises that were made when he was elected.
Ms. Hong Nong, how do you see the problem? How do you see the question?
Well, if there's only one phrase, I would think about transactional, but after second thought, I think I prefer to use norm challenging.
Norm challenging.
Yes, because he used very sharp rhetoric to talk about its allies, and he keeps politics highly personal, and he prefers open and also very vivid confrontation over quiet bargainings. So I think there's a lot of action that he's taking lately actually reflect his approach of like norms challenging or even norms breaker.
Norm challenging, even norm breaking. Professor Liu.
I think he's shifting more from being cynical now to getting more antagonistic of any type of institutions, political opposition, and disregarding all the allies who do not really conform with his proposition. So antagonistic would be a right word to describe him.
Antagonistic. Okay. These four descriptions share something in common, but not entirely the same. It's interesting to reflect upon obsessive, work in progress towards MAGA, norm challenging or norm destroying, and antagonistic. Let's try to break it down a little bit, although we have very limited time, but let's still try to scratch the surface, at least domestically, if I may start. President Trump worked to pass his One Big Beautiful Bill Act, but the act is expected to increase deficit by 3.4 trillion over the next 10 years. He also created the Department of Government Efficiency, although the U.S. suffered the longest shutdown in 43 days. Actually, recent polls, whether by the left or by the right, have shown pretty stark assessment of his performance. I'm going to go to Margaret in terms of domestic policy, be it the economy, be it ICE, anti-immigration. What is his biggest achievement? What would his biggest failure?
Well, his biggest achievement is just getting what he wants. I don't think the things that he wants, though, are good for the country. This big, beautiful bill cuts government spending, cuts subsidies for health care, cuts health care for low-income people. It has a terrible effect on the population. Even when he claims he's helping the country, these tariffs were supposed to reindustrialize the United States, which isn't going to happen. But he's a man who believes in the power, the executive power of his office. And he has given a lie to the excuses Democratic presidents make about what they can and cannot do. We have a president who forces law firms to give pro bono help to people he likes, who claims that schools, colleges have discriminated against certain students, against Jewish students, because they've had protests at
So basically,
Palestine.
yeah.
So he gets what he wants.
So basically, you're
But
saying
that's also a failure.
basically you're saying no win, just failure. You're very negative about his first term, his first year in office for this time.
Yes, he gets what he wants, but those things are bad for the country.
All right. Professor Quelch.
I think contrasting this term so far with the first term, there are a couple of differences. One is that he is surrounded by true believers and no naysayers in his cabinet, whereas in the first term, he surrounded himself with thoughtful experts who he didn't know that well, but who turned out to be perhaps slowing things down. This time round, he's fast out of the gate. He knows what his plan has to be. He has only 4 years to achieve it. I think he's already done in 1 year, rightly or wrongly, more than most people achieve or attempt to achieve in 4 years. But there's one other thing, Shin, and that is that during the first term, he was able to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices. That gives him a great measure of latitude now in the second term to file all sorts of executive orders that may go unchallenged or which are upheld by the courts. And accordingly, I think he feels emboldened to enhance the scope of the executive branch at the expense of the other two.
Ms. Hong Nong, how do you look at the domestic agenda of President Trump? I mean, economy-wise, actually, even if you look at recent polls from Fox News, for instance, it shows us, some warning signs. The independents, for instance, are quite negative about his performance domestically, especially when it comes to high prices, reigning and high prices. And when it comes to trade war, for instance, the weaponizing of tariffs in April, the so-called Liberation Day, the United States may be gathering record amount of tariffs, but is that potentially actually linked to the high prices? So how do you rate his performance domestically?
Well, first of all, I'm not an economist. I don't claim to have the right knowledge to evaluate the economic performance, but I can certainly tell how people feel on the ground by sharing experience living and working in the U.S. So maybe some numbers show stability, but the people living in the U.S., they sense that the value economy not through the GDP, not through the share market. They feel it through whether they are affordable, whether they are salary affordable, the prices of the housing, and they want to talk more about the rent and the child care and health care issue, which is very important for a lot of American people are working back home. So when it comes to the tariff, actually when we look very carefully, when Donald Trump and his administration, and when they talk about the tariff, that's not really about trade policy. It's about leverage it used to bargaining with even his very close allies. So we are looking at a very complicated scenario. On the one hand, he talked a lot about improving economic performance, but on the other hand, when you talk to the people living here, and they probably don't feel the same way, because when the majority of the poor, they tell people that they're not feeling comfortable about the health of the economy, which points to the gap between affordability and economic performance.
From what you're experiencing, the prices, are they consistently high?
I believe so. If you go to the grocery shopping, you can see the dramatic increase of very little thing like spring onion that we purchase in China. It's increasing double and triple. That's a very serious increase of the living expenses, and which is a very damaging indicator for a lot of people working here without the salary being able to afford many of the expenses.
Meanwhile, China is exporting in record amount, maybe not to the United States, but overall, China's foreign trade is doing okay. Let's talk about another term which has gone viral on Chinese social media, but also picked up by the New York Times, for instance, which is a kill line. The U.S. kill line. It's rather complicated. I suggest that people Google it themselves. But the basic idea is that there is such a widening wealth gap, and the situation of the bottom 50%, let's say, or however large that is actually not good. And there was a question that was posted by the China Media Group journalist to the Secretary of Treasury Bassett in Switzerland on the World Economic Forum, and he said, the U.S. is President Trump's economic policy will provide a big tax refund for those who need help, for the very bottom on the scale of income. Professor Liu, under that circumstance, 1 year in, are Americans in a very volatile financial situation becoming less or more?
Well, it is really a very complex issue because he's continuing to strengthen the belief among his solid constituencies, which are really more of the lower class, that this is really a conditional. You got to endure all the pain in order to achieve a brighter future and broad prosperity. But the reality, it has not been delivered. And the fact that he's going to bring more quality jobs and he's going to bring more of the industrialization drive, and people do not really feel it. So this is something of the empty rhetorics that is there. But people do not really look at all the macroeconomic policies or international relations. Do I really pay more for my shopping baskets? And does my household bills really increase? So this is something that people are really concerned about. But he still, be able to manage some of the hardliner constituency by saying that, okay, this is temporary, bear with me, I'm going to give you something that's far better even beyond our expectation.
Let's try to be fair here. I mean, he's only into office for 1 year in his second term. Can we really say, the high prices or that the fact that the economy is not turning much better is entirely his fault? I'm going to give this question to Margaret.
Well, no, it's not entirely his fault. We have a system which does not benefit the people. This narrative of the kill line is about precarity that Americans have been living under for years. We have wages that have not kept pace with inflation, the price of housing, basic necessities, the price of an education, healthcare, all of the things that people need to survive. All of those costs keep rising, and employment and incomes do not keep up. That was true with the last president and the president before him. So we have this quadrennial theater where someone makes a better rhetorical case and gets to be president. But as long as we have the capitalist class running the country who demand precarity, who demand this kill line, that people live these lives of desperation, then we will have a succession of, as we've already had, of presidents making promises that they will not keep.
Professor Quelch, do you have a slightly different opinion on this? Do you think President Trump is at least trying to do the right thing to address these problems?
Energy costs have come down considerably since the beginning of the administration. That's only one component of the inflation that individual households suffering from. It's clear that, as Margaret said, grocery store prices have not come down as far and as fast as the president and his administration would have liked, and that is reflected in the polling. I think that it is the motivation for the potential refund checks of $2,000 to every household earning under, I think, $100,000 per year has been mooted as the cutoff point. It may be lower than that, but certainly there is hurt in the country in the lower socioeconomic levels of society, and people do need help. Now, I think that on some other fronts, President Trump and his administration have actually been quite forceful and creative, and I'm referring to drug prices, which are a major concern for elderly, poor people, and also you have the arena of housing, where President Trump has volunteered some very creative ideas to put some lids on the escalating cost of housing. And I think he has the ear of the senior executives of the major building firms in the United States, the major real estate firms, to be able to potentially over the 4 years solve that problem. But these types of challenges cannot be solved in 1 year. I would just mention two other things, if I may. One is that regarding the 3.4 trillion that you were mentioning for the great beautiful bill, the big beautiful bill, that actually constitutes only, not only, but it's 10% of the current federal debt of the United States, and over 10 years, the growth of the United States economy should be able to handle that.
Okay. Ms. Hong Nong, it seems that Professor Quelch has a much more nuanced approach to rating President Trump's economy performance domestically. Do you agree with his points that he is actually, doing the right thing on some fronts, at least to cap expenses to help those who are in need of help?
It may means the right thing for some people, and it may means the wrong thing for the people with different agenda or different priorities. For people who support him and make so-called mega, I think they are welcoming suggestions that it's pulling back many of the investment and pulling back many of its overseas factories back to U.S. And for those gestures, I think it will be seen really as a positive for some people. But for other people, for instance, they are more adapted to the U.S. traditional way of dealing with, for instance, providing foreign assistance, foreign aid. Many of his action has been seen very negatively, because if you look back in Washington, some of the think tanks in terms of policy making has been scaled back, and some of the institutions which are very relevant to providing foreign assistance has been either shrunken or dismantled, like USAID, and which actually seen a very mixed thing, or at least very a negative signal for people who are looking at the U.S. as a security provider, as a rule setting, playing a leadership role in many global norms.
Indeed, it's a very complex picture. And then there is the illegal immigration problem that President Trump has been very forceful about, sending ICE personnel around the country. Professor Liu, how do you look at this aspect? Some people are saying, as aggressive, as brutal as it looks, is quite effective.
Well, this is really a very mixed perception that is being harvested by so far. Fundamentally and traditionally, U.S. really became U.S. simply because they were open for immigration, and that's there, to form the salad bowl with diversity of contribution of different talents, and contributing also to the division of labor among the country. But it seems that illegal immigration, if you really label on that part, and that's something gave the United States a certain legitimacy of doing that. But the problem is really long inherited by Donald Trump, that they do not really provide the right type of institutional mechanism to really harness the unity among the new immigrants, and also to provide the training, and also to get them more accumulated and also assimilated in the community. So this is something that they are doing now. With the tougher approach in terms of setting up the iron wall, in terms of the using ICE to drive those out. So there are also the civil rights issue, human rights issue, and whether that's going to be really helping the economy. Of course, some of the neighborhood would feel uneasy if there are new immigrants, particularly when they do not really have the right visa. They feel uneasy about it, but they need really to look at the overall picture and also reflect, retrospect on the tradition of the United States. And more importantly, it's really the constitutional mandates, whether that's going to allow such a sort of aggressive operation, and even the prosecutive operation.
Yeah. Well, I don't have much time left. We haven't touched upon the foreign policy and the consequences for this administration in a global sense. I'm going to give each and every one of you the opportunity to do that in a sweeping manner, but bearing in mind, the big picture we're looking at. Whether or not President Trump inherited some of the problems, we're not going to be able to tell the difference at this moment. But just saying, going forward, or 1 year on, what is the biggest consequence in your eyes on the world because of this administration? Professor Quelch.
I think, Shin, everything that we assumed can no longer be assumed. There has been a lot of challenge to established institutions, a lot of challenge to the rules-based order, as we call it. Some of those challenges are grounded in, I think, a legitimate questioning of whether or not people have been paying their fair share, or whether or not there has been a sufficient return on investment. And I think that is President Trump's, in a sense, his forte is to be disruptive. But at the same time, I think that he often is very antagonistic in his public statements, but inclined to back off quite readily in private. It's just all about the art of the deal. You make an extravagant demand at the front end, and then you back off as needed. So I think Secretary Bessent's words are quite useful to bear in mind, and those are along the lines of, essentially, don't believe everything you hear. All will be well. It will be worked out behind closed doors.
Hopefully,
the attention.
Hopefully,
the attention
Kimberley,
sorry,
Kimberley.
Disruption.
Kimberley, your turn. Keep it short, please.
Yes, we have continuity of agenda. We have yet another president dedicated to giving the U.S. primacy, as they call it, giving the U.S. hegemony, continuing policies in Gaza, continuing policies in Ukraine while pretending not to, continuing U.S. policy and actually kidnapping the president of Venezuela. We see continuity of agenda from Washington.
Continuity or intensification, even? Would you
intensification, but it's the same thing, and people should not be fooled by his manner or his words. He's doing what most people do.
Okay. Hong Nong.
2 points on the U.S. foreign policy. One is between the U.S. and its allies like NATO. The frequently repeating talk of taking Greenland or even taking Canada, it's a symbolic. It's not going to happen, but it's going to erode the confidence and erode the trust between the U.S. and its allies, which is going to be dangerous in the past. But it will remain on the rhetoric rather than a realistic path to achieve it. And another point is between U.S. and China. I think in the 2026, if we look ahead, both countries are going to remain as competitors. But I do believe there is areas that the two countries, at least they need to show up in institution and coordination like climate change, climate resilience, and supply chain, and also other issues like providing for public goods. I think those are areas that the U.S.-China should actually continue to work together.
Well, we haven't talked about this. I mean, major country relationship, but we don't have much time. But Professor Liu, actually, President Trump said some things which is music to China's ear. For instance, how China resolved the issue across the Taiwan Strait is our own business. I mean, in that case, I think this is a small win for both countries.
Well, that's a political and economic issue, but broadly speaking, I think the level of trust over the U.S. credibility and accountability will definitely be reduced, and more of those economies and countries are getting more vigilant for their own sovereign autonomy. So this is something that even among their allies. So therefore, more of the regional blocs will be going to be formed to protect themselves. And
what about the United Nations? Do you see the United Nations in
the global institutions, from United Nations to WTO, etc., will be reshaped and will also be substituted to certain dimensions of their own deficiency now that the U.S. legitimacy, U.S. support are being more selective. So this is something that the world is going to experience quite a sort of change, after even the end of the Second World War.
Some people say we'll just wait out the period. Do you believe that, Professor Liu, that the whole system will be intact, although there are disruptions over the next couple of years, things will return, and because the world is too big.
Yes, that's right. I think the dynamism of the globalization in terms of paradigm will not be ordered by certain leader or by certain rhetorics, but people will have to be more adaptive into the new changes, into the format, how people can really work together for the benefit of their own people.